Law of One, session 83. Let's begin this session talking about third density disease. Let's begin. In this first part, we're going to talk about different topics actually, and some of them are going to lead into a discussion about disease in third density, and I think there's a lot of useful information there. So I think the majority of the information is going to be towards that. But again, just as a refresher, we've been talking about the prevail conditions, and so that's going to be part of this discussion, as Don wants to know more of this difference between the experience prevail and how were things perceived and how things happen, and based on what he knows, what's the difference now in third density post-veil. So I don't have much to introduce the session. Other than that, we're going to talk about different topics, but mostly concentrate on that difference between prevail, post-veil, and talking about disease. So let's see what we have. Let's begin with the first question, which is Don asking, as usual, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? And Ra says it is as previously stated. Nothing new. Don asks in question 2, could you please tell me why the instrument gains weight now instead of loses it after a session? So if you remember, she was losing weight before, now she's gaining weight. Ra says, very long answer, but it's not too complicated. They say to assume that the instrument is gaining the weight of the physical bodily complex due to a session or working with Ra is erroneous. The instrument has no longer any physical material which, to any observable extent, must be used in order for this contact to occur. This is due to the determination of the group that the instrument shall not use the vital energy which would be necessary since the physical energy complex level is in deficit. Since the energy, therefore, for these contacts is a product of energy transfer, the instrument must no longer pay this physical price. Therefore, the instrument is not losing the weight. There's more, they say, more things, but I wanted to pause here to actually make a remark that it's interesting that she was losing weight because apparently she was consciously or unconsciously dedicating her physical energy to the contact, but once she became aware of that, and all of them actually, then they made the mental switch onto use vital energy. Transferred energy. Vital energy is part of the physical energy. So yeah, it's just interesting that she was now using transferred energy. What's more important to me is that the sessions have been getting longer. Have you noticed that? So since she was in that state of physical energy bankruptcy, as Ra called it, she started using more transferred energy, which came in the form of, as I am aware of, sexual energy transfer, and also physical energy transfer that was through the exercise of fire. Don't ask me what it is. I don't know it. I think it's something that they did, particularly something that they learned somewhere. And there is another energy transfer, which is the one of, I don't even know how to call it, but is that energy of praying, or like when you send, I forgot what Ra called it, but when you're sending good energies, good vibes, as they say, to other people, then that's that type of energy transfer that she would also use. So I don't know, I just find it very interesting that the sessions were getting longer and she was using now more transferred energy. So all right, because of that, she's not losing physical weight anymore. Good news. They continue saying, however, the weight gain as it occurs is the product of two factors. One is the increasing sensitivity of this physical vehicle to all that is placed before it, including that towards which it is distorted in ways you would call allergic. The second factor is the energizing of these difficulties. I hope I'm not interpreting this wrong, but Ross seems to say that Carla was just eating anything she found in front of her, right? The increasing sensitivity of this physical vehicle, her body, to all that is placed before it, right? Including that towards, oh no, maybe that's just my interpretation. Including that towards which it is distorted in ways you would call allergic. So maybe it's just sensitivity in the sense of allergies. So she used to become insensitive to anything that was around her, specifically allergies. I don't know, somehow it just sounds like she started eating anything that was placed before her. But no, I think it's just the allergic reaction or sensitivity of the body. The second factor is the energizing of these difficulties. Yes, so that means water retention, of course, when you're bloated because of allergies. You inflammation and so on. Then Ra finishes saying, it is fortunate for the outlook of this contact and the incarnation of this entity that it is not distorted towards the overeating, as the overloading of this much distorted physical complex would override even the most fervent affirmations of health illness and turn the instrument towards the distortions of illness health, or in the extreme case, the physical death. So maybe there was an element there of overeating, or eating like more sensitivity for food. I don't know, I'm kind of split there. What do you think? You think she was overeating? Well, Ross says that she was not distorted towards overeating, so she was not overeating. But maybe, remember that throughout the year and change that has passed in these 80-something sessions, where are we? 1982, so it's been a year and 3 months, 4 months. 3 months. A year and a quarter, right? So in all that time, she lost a lot of weight, and due to that weight loss, she was having these difficulties with physical energy, and then now she has, she's gaining weight. So maybe she's eating more. I don't know. But yeah, good thing she was not an overeater. That would have created health issues and also possibly physical death of eating too much, which is something, of course, we know. We can't overeat. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Don says, thank you. I'm going to ask a rather long, complex question here, and I would request that the answer to each portion of this question be given if there was a significant difference prior to the veil than following the veil, so that I can get an idea of how what we experience now is used for better polarization. So here we go with Don wanting to know, getting into the pre-veil and post-veil. He says, asking if there is any significant difference and what was the difference before the veil in the following while incarnate in third density: sleep, dreams, physical pain, mental pain, sex, disease, catalyst, programming, random catalyst, relationships or communication with the higher self or with the mind, body, spirit totality, or any other mind, body, or spirit functions before the veil that would be significant with respect to their difference after the veil, That's a very, it's not only complex, but it's very ambitious. So there's a lot that Don wants to know here. Let's see what Ross says. They say, firstly, let us establish that both before and after the veil, the same conditions existed in time-space. That is, the veiling process is a space-time phenomenon. Okay, so time-space was always the same. Secondly, they say, the character of experience was altered drastically by the veiling process. In some cases, such as the dreaming and the contact with the higher self, the experience was quantitatively different due to the fact that the veiling is a primary cause of the value of dreams and is also the single door against which the higher self must stand awaiting entry. Let's keep reading. Before veiling, dreams were not for the purpose of using the so-called unconscious to further utilize catalysts, but were used to teach learners within the inner planes, as well as those of outer origin of higher density. As you deal with each subject of which you spoke, you may observe during the veiling process not a quantitative change in the experience, but a qualitative one. So, the dream, however, right? First of all, I think that they're not going to cover all the points that Don asked about sleep, dreams, physical pain, sex, mental pain, disease, catalyst, programming, random catalyst, all of this. So they're just going to generalize, I believe, and give an example in sex. That's it. But the first thing to establish is that time-space is always the same. So, okay, what are we dealing with here? We're talking about the face. Don was interested in this in the last session, if memory serves. He was talking about the conditions in what was the purpose of the between incarnations, that period between incarnations, which is after death, time space, life review, programming, healing, all of that. So he's interested in knowing what's the difference pre and post veil. Did he say that? He didn't say anything about time space, but at least Ra is given that. He's saying time space is always the same. Why? Because after incarnation, you go through the process of review, healing, if there was any healing to be done, which prior to the veil was no necessity for healing, according to Ra. And yeah, just the conditions are the same in time space. You are still reviewing your incarnation for further experience, which is going to tie in beautifully with something else that I mentioned later on. So, okay, then they talk about the character of experience was altered drastically by the veiling process. We can definitely picture this as the difference between knowing who you are, knowing what you are, knowing what everything is, seeing the connection between everything, and not doing so. And so by not doing so, you're having this experience right now in which you know how you feel. You see, it's very different, isolated, segregated. The experience is, it's more intense. So Ross says, in some cases, such as the dreaming and the contact with the higher self, the experience was quantitatively different. So I suppose dreaming and contacting with higher self is less than what it used to be, right? That's why it's quantitatively refers to quantities. The amount of times you could communicate with higher self and have dreams then were reduced after the veil. They say it's due to the fact that the veiling is a primary cause of the values of dreams and is also the single door against which the higher self must stand awaiting entry. Maybe it's the opposite with dreaming. Maybe there is more dreaming now. They say it's the primary cause of the value of dreams. So I'm not sure on this, what was before or after. I would think there would be more of the activity of dreaming before, if we see it as something that was available. But maybe there was no need for dreaming back then because you had communication. So maybe the change was now. Yeah, I'm not sure on that. It could be the former, or actually the latter. I'm not sure. And it's also the single door against which the higher self must stand awaiting entry. That seems to me actually that it is less communication now with the higher self than what it used to be before. But I could be wrong. Could be the opposite or the other way around. I don't know. Then they say before veiling, dreams were not for the purpose of using the so-called unconscious to further utilize catalysts, but were used to teach learners within the inner planes, as well as those of outer origin or of higher density. So, in essence, dreams were used for learning. They weren't used for processing catalysts or for studying catalysts, right? That's what we do now. Why? Because we're getting in touch with the unconscious. So in the dreaming state, the conscious mind is exploring a little bit more the unconscious, and especially with whatever is happening right now. So it's depicting what's happening in the unconscious mind. And so that is obviously due to catalysts. Whatever it is that is worrying the mind that needs to be processed, that catalyst that is coming is going to be represented in dreams. So those of you who record your dreams and have your landscape of dreams, meaning that you know exactly, well, not exactly, but you know a lot more the symbology of your dreams and what they mean, and you have been doing it for a while, then you know that this is a way for you to see what's happening in your life right now, to be able to process catalyst as it's happening in your life, and then you dream about it and you have more information. So that's what's happening now. Prior to the veil, what was happening was that there was it was a doorway to communicate with higher planes and even inner planes. So when Ra talks about inner planes, they're talking about the sub-densities that exist right now. So those that are related to, at least, to our chakras, to our energy centers. And those are the inner planes. And then there is the outer origin of higher density, which is just 4th, 5th, 6th density. So you can imagine that prior to the veil, there was communication directly with, why not? I mean, there was no veil, there was no hiding of the connectiveness of everything. So yeah, there was communication, and that helped for teaching and learning. Not so much apparently, because they didn't polarize, or maybe, I don't know, the teacher learning wasn't that efficient because they were still stuck in 3rd density, not polarizing. But yeah, then Ra finishes and says, as you deal with each subject of which you spoke, you may observe during the veiling process not a quantitative change in the experience, but a qualitative one. So in essence, mental pain, sex, what else did Don say? Catalysts, of course, programming, random catalysts, relationships, communication with the higher self, or any other function has been qualitatively changed, not quantitatively, meaning the quality of it has been increased by this veiling process. This makes sense again, because we have been talking about how pallid and incipient this incipient, is that the right word? I'm not sure. Insipido, meaning not flavor, not intense, not colorful. That was the experience pre-veil. So now after the veil, everything intensifies. So that's what I believe Ra is talking about here when they say qualitative one, more quality to a higher quality, I should say. And this is a decision that the Logos made because there was no polarization, so we had to draw the veil. And that makes sense because now there is an intensity of experience, especially this drama. I love the Hindu description of the cosmos. I really do, because I think that is the ultimate purpose of the Creator, which is to enjoy itself. You see, it's just one infinite experience. Think about it as your imagination. If you can improve your imagination to live, to experience your imagination, wouldn't you do it? Of course you would, because you're safe. Nothing's happening to you. But you can have all kinds of things happen to you in your imagination, and you can experience them. That's exactly what's happening. So the cosmos is not a random thing that's happening. It's not created by anybody who is watching, and there are no rules, nothing. It's just one imagination, one dream, and the purpose of it is experience, as Ra says. And the quality of it is its drama. You know, what will happen? You know, what could happen if I add in all these factors? One of those factors was the veil. And lo and behold, here we are, wondering if we are actually alone in this universe, or if consciousness is something that is only in the brain, and all these things that create the drama of the depressed humanity. Oh, it's actually, it's so beautiful that even those who I would call philosophers of science, hardcore science, materialist science, they still produce this nostalgic view of the universe, where they say heat death, everything will decay into nothingness. Well, that's how we started, right? So everything will go back to its original state, nothingness, no movement at all. But all right, let's move on with this last part of the question. Ross says, let us, as an example, choose your sexual activities of energy transfer. If you have a desire to treat other subjects in detail, please query forthwith. In the instance of the sexual activity of those not dwelling within the veiling, each activity was a transfer. There were some transfers of strength. Most were rather attenuated in the strength of the transfer due to the lack of veiling. In the third density, entities are attempting to learn the ways of love. If it can be seen that all are one being, it becomes much more difficult for the undisciplined personality to choose one mate and thereby initiate itself into a program of service. It is much more likely that the sexual energy will be dissipated more randomly without either great joy or great sorrow, depending from these experiences. There's a little bit more. Maybe I should just read that. Ross says, finally, therefore, the green ray energy transfer being almost without exception the case in sexual energy transfer prior to the veiling, remains weakened and without significant crystallization. The sexual energy transfers and blockages after veiling have been discussed previously. It may be seen to be a more complex study, but one far more efficient in crystallizing those who seek the green ray energy center. Okay, so this is something that Ra knows a lot about because they were a very sexual-oriented society, civilization, humanity. I don't know, can't call them humans. But they say that they sort of excelled, or not excelled, they didn't say excel, but they participated a lot or explored a lot the sexual energy transfer in their third density experience. So so they're using sex as a a way to describe the difference between pre-veil and post-veil. So pre-veil, if you know that everything is one being, right? Choose in the instant of the sexual activity. What's this? Yes, they say. Okay, so yeah, they use sex and they say those not dwelling within the veiling, each activity was a transfer. So that's an important thing. You see, I guess because there is no separation, then there is no. You see, you lose the capacity of having this strong relationship with somebody, this very intense. I can't call it romantic, but it could be romantic. But yeah, this intense merging with the other, or desire to merge with the other, that was not present before. Because why would you do that? When you can see that everybody is the one being, so it's you. You see, so you can see how it's, as Ross said, the experiences are attenuated, right? Most were rather attenuated in the strength of the transfer due to the lack of veiling. And it makes sense. Why would you want to prefer somebody or have a strong, deep desire of the other? That's what causes this strong attachment to people here, right? And it's something that Buddhists talk about extensively, of how that's just part of our own ignorance. And you see, in a way, pursuing this path is a way to get out of desire, or I shouldn't even say get out of desire, like if there's somebody there to get out of desire, but to watch desire transmute into a equanimous love for everything. So this is a very, very descriptive view of how reality works. But yeah, transfer was each activity was a transfer. There was an immediate connection with the other person, but that connection wasn't very strong. I think that's the way I can put it. Prior to the veil, there was immediate connection with everybody. You were in ecstasy all the time, but there wasn't a strength to it. There wasn't a passion to it. That's what it was missing, passion. Then they say in the third density, entities are attempting to learn the ways of love. Well, that's the purpose here. Very important point. We're learning the ways of love. That's what third density is about. We learn the lessons of separation as an individual. That was second density to third density. That's why we're still riding this orange wave, if you will, of the second density to third density animalistic behavior of territoriality, competition, survival, and dominance over the other species. And of course, humans are another species because they're not you, right? That's how separated we've gotten. At least packs in the wild take care of each other. Not so much here. I was watching a video on the Russian Revolution last night, and with my son, and we were saying, like, I mean, there has always been this segregation of patriotic views, and no offense to anybody, but it seems like the Russian history has been plagued with just selfishness, like total selfishness of people in power. Let's just put it that way, because it wasn't a government, but we can call it a government. In any case, we're so used to that behavior. But in any case, we're moving into learning the ways of love. How do we appreciate this life? You know, how do we melt back into that pre-veil condition, which is really what we're aiming for, right? That's what third density is about. But Ra is talking about the prevail condition in which, yes, even there's a lack of love or intensifying of the love. Ra says, if it can be seen that all are one being, it becomes much more difficult for the undisciplined personality to choose one mate, and so start a program of service with someone, which is, again, it's one way. You don't have to pick a partner. You don't have to pick, if you are asexual or simply don't want partners, people, that's a very real thing. Some people are not interested in having, a wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, a partner, sexual, intimate partner. You don't have to. So Ross says, it is much more likely that sexual energy will be dissipated more randomly without either great joy or great sorrow, depending from these experiences, right? So that sexual energy is just dissipated. Yeah, that's a good word. As opposed to intensify or concentrate. And then finally they say that the green ray energy transfer being almost without exception the case in sexual energy transfer prior to the veiling, the green ray energy transfer being almost without exception the case in sexual energy transfer prior to the veiling, although there was no possibility to block the heart in energy transfer through sex, because there was no ego, there was no sense of separate self prior to the veil. You see, that was not possible. Although that was, how do I describe this? I think you get the picture already without me describing it. There was no blockages, so all transfers were of the heart, but they were weak and without significant crystallization. Somehow it is needed that this becomes intense, that we become intense in our love for reality. It doesn't have to be another person. It's just that another person represents also you. See, and you collapse this. You use this. That's the program of service that Ross talking about here. And I'll emphasize, you don't need to have somebody with you. And this is coming from somebody who has the perfect relationship. I've always said it. Ups and downs always, but I have the perfect relationship with Julie. And it's not the perfect, but my perfect relationship, or our perfect relationship. And yet, I recognize that this is not needed. I certainly don't need her, and she doesn't need me. We're just happy to be together and enjoy and have very little of those, oh, I'm not sure what you're going to say if I say this, or if I want this, or if I want to do this. There is none of that anymore. And so that has been a program of service through the years to get to this point, but it is possible, and I think everybody yearns for this, but they're too afraid of letting go of their ego and their own selfish needs, which is not a criticism, it's just how we are. And I know, I can speak by experience. Letting go of my ego with her has been a tremendous healing. How do I call it? Healthy is not the word. Well, it's been healthy, but a healing process for all of us, for both of us. Well, yeah, all of us, because if I heal, you heal, right? I think that's said in the Course of Miracles. I recently just read that from somebody who quoted it in my Patreon, and thank you, Patrick, if you're listening. All right, it may be seen to be a more complex study, the one to do, with this program of service, but one far more efficient in crystallizing those who seek the green ray energy center. I can attest to that. But I can also attest to the next question. I don't think I have much to say here. We got the illustration, we got the picture of prevail, very little interaction between each other, intensely. It was just too general. and now very intense because we seek that. I can go on for a while here, but I won't, because there's so much to talk about here. In question 4, Don says, let's take then, since we are on the subject of sex, the relationship before and after the veil of disease. In this particular case, venereal disease. Was this type of disease in existence prior to the veil? Ross says, there has been that which is called disease, both of this type and others, before and after this great experiment. However, since the venereal disease is in large part a function of the thought forms of a distorted nature which are associated with sexual energy blockage, the venereal disease is almost entirely the product of mind-body-spirit complexes interaction after the veiling. This is a very, very, very crucial and the beginnings of a controversial topic, which is, what is disease? And should we be concerned with disease? Again, it's a sensitive topic, especially nowadays where everybody is concerned about their health. But it's one that can, if you're following this path, of course, if you're watching this video, you're quite interested in the metaphysics behind this. Disease is created in the mind, of course. And this sort of solves a lot of the mysteries that we have, because our model says that you are naturally a healthy person. Well, that's not fully true, but in general, if you're healthy, you're healthy. And then there are external things that are causing you to be diseased, to be ill, and to be affected by bacteria, viruses, and fungi, all kinds of alive things that want to feed from you. Well, this is actually like I said, a very complex topic, but I think I can get away with saying that it is not only the function of a virus or a bacteria or fungi, and you are just a victim. You see, you have to have the environment. And I think this has been recognized more and more lately, thanks to our previous pandemic, where everybody got interested and more doctors started talking about not only the establishment, but more of what it really is. And so we have been talking about this environment that we have in our bodies, and we are prone to certain disease. That environment is, of course, created by the mind, and that's why we have, especially talking about venereal disease, people who have the virus of HIV, and they don't suffer it. They have no issues. Or people who go into infected areas and they serve there, like nurses and doctors, and they're fine because their environment is not welcoming this disease. You know, it's the people who are sick who get this. This is also associated to when people are in harmony with themselves, they don't get sick. Normally, you see, everybody can get sick, and that's fine. Doesn't mean that you're failing, you're sinning. You may have some propensities. For example, in my case, somehow I developed asthma when I was 9 months old. You can say that was a pre-incarnative decision, or you can say that was something from a previous incarnation, which I brought here and I need to heal. I don't know. I just don't know. I just know that I have that propensity. And when I was a child, I suffered more than what now I can possibly get when allergies kick in, as just recently. So there are so many things that can come into play. But in general, there is the thought forms. That's the key part. See, because Ra is saying here, there has been that which is called disease, both of this type, venereal, and others. So yes, disease was always a thing before and after the veil. They call it this great experiment, which I agree, it's great. Ra says, since venereal disease is in large part a function of the thought forms of a distorted nature which are associated with sexual energy blockage, the venereal disease is almost entirely the product of mind-body-spirit complexes interaction after the veiling. So the venereal disease is mostly a manifestation of our sexual blockages, sexual energy blockages. And they talked about these blockages before, which is the fear of being possessed, or the desire to possess, or the fear, I forget it always confuses me the way they said it. The desire to possess, or the desire to be possessed, the fear to possess, or the fear to be possessed. Yeah, those are the main blockages that happen. And they come in all kinds of forms. So all of us have a story in our minds that can create blockages. These are just some of the blockages I see, because others can be, which I have experienced, is that sex is a sort of perversion, or something that is not, because it's not well seen by everybody. We don't talk about it. We keep it hidden. Nobody wants. It's dirty. It's something that, and even the methods in which I kind of agree with something that Scott Mandelker said here, and it stuck with me, that the way we prevent this venereal disease is by the use of condoms, which, again, see, I told you this was going to be controversial, but like he said, it is a way to degrade the act of sex. It is, I'm going to get intimate with you, but I'm going to put this around me so I don't touch you, So it becomes this thing that I want to do, but it's just so filthy that I need to be isolated from you. Yes, I know there is a use for contraception there, but we're talking about venereal disease here. So yeah, there's a lot to be talked about there. Like, why do you want to be with a person that you don't trust? That's the first question. If you don't trust each other, if there's things hiding, then why? You see. So yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much, again, we can talk about here. Here's another one. I don't know what the statistics are now, but I'm pretty sure it's the same or more. But 50% or more of people on Earth who have engaged in sexual activity, and even possibly not even, I don't know how the transmission is. Is it the HPV? I forget the HPV. Is it? Let me just make sure that it is, so I don't speak nonsense. Is the the human papilloma virus. I know it in Spanish, so I always get it. I mix them. Not only that, but yeah. Anyhow, so this is an STD or an STI, and half of the people who have sex have it. You see, so are we all infected? Yes. But do we manifest it? No. Because viruses are dormant. They're just there. They're just part of, the database. And they can act and manifest and create this disease or not. And they can become cancerous, of course. Everything can. So it's not a matter of infection. You are infected of all kinds of viruses. Ask the Indians if you can find one, because when the Europeans came here, they were totally healthy, and all they did was just share their DNA database with the others, and that wasn't through sex; it was just through breathing and everything. They mixed the virus makeup of Europe here, and it blasted the majority of people. Think that it was the conquistadors that came here and killed all the Indians. No, it was disease. That's what wiped the Indians here. So you see, there is this infection, but it's the thought forms that create that sort of disease in the body. I'm not surprised that at the moment that the Europeans came over and sharing this new sort of virus that they didn't have, well, the Indians here, or the Indian tribes, they weren't too pacific or peaceful. They were increasingly becoming dystopic, I would say. Like, just human sacrifice was a thing going on left and right. It was just crazy. So yeah, you can imagine that in such a society, and with the distribution of viruses, then that's what you get. You get catalysts, my friend. So it's okay. In any case, why did I deviate so much? Where am I? Okay, so since the venereal disease is in large part a function of the thought forms of a distorted nature, which are associated with sexual energy blockage, then the disease is almost entirely a product of us, post-veil. So, yeah, give it a good think. It's interesting that that's what's causing the disease. It's us. We are always the cause of it. So might as well own to it. And yes, I don't want to ignore the fact that there is, I've said it a couple of times, but I'll just reinforce it. Yes, there is transmission, just like there is transmission of thoughts. You see, here's the best example. If I tell you you're an idiot, okay, that's me. I'm the virus right here. You're an idiot. And that goes into you. See, you're infected with the thought, I am an idiot, because Gabe said it. Okay, but what are you going to do with that? See, or how, it's not you. How is that processed through your mind? Probably laughing at this point, smiling, or maybe you're upset. Who knows? That depends on you. So in the same way, that's how this develops. Let's move on. Question 5, Don says, you mention it did exist in a small way prior to the veil. What was the source of its development prior to the veiling process? Good question. So how did this develop prior to the veil? If it was only a mind, body, spirit complex, and complex is post-veil. Ross says, the source was as random as the nature of disease distortions are, at heart, in general. Each portion of the body complex is in a state of growth at all times. The reversal of this is seen as disease and has the beginning or the benign function of ending an incarnation at an appropriate space-time nexus. This was the nature of disease, including that which you call venereal. So really, really important point here. And this is beautiful, actually. I think we're going to expand a little bit more on this, but let me set the stage. Disease is random in that it's thought patterns, right? It's part of even prior to the veil, there was, of course, surprising or unknown things becoming part of our experiential continuum, meaning that although we knew who we were and what everybody was and the connectiveness of all of us, we didn't know everything. Obviously, if we knew everything, then we wouldn't exist. Imagine that you know everything that could possibly happen, potentially happen, has happened, everything. You would know absolutely nothing. You see how this plays out? You have to have ignorance to know things, and if you know everything, you know nothing. So thanks to ignorance, you know things. And this is something that I find it funny in philosophers when they pose the question, will we ever know everything? You can't. You can't. Only infinity knows everything, and therefore has no experience. Infinity must veil itself, which is not the veil of forgetting, but it is tied to it. I think it's there's a beautiful correlation there, but I don't want to mix it. Infinity becomes aware, that is veiling itself. See, an immediate veil is drawn. I can know myself. See, that's the initial thought. And I will know myself. That's infinity. And infinity is conscious, is awareness. So clearly it wants to become aware of itself through experience. Now, where was I? Oh yes. So the purpose of evolution as we know it is, and I mean as we know it here in the Law of One, is that consciousness goes through different stages of coalescing into matter, then moving and growing. That's what animals and plants do. They move and grow, and then eventually become self-aware. That's their density. So we're still in this process of moving and growing. The body particularly moves and grows, right? It's ever changing, always changing. And so awareness must adapt to that change without effort. If we put resistance to the change, then disease may happen. We know this. I don't have to explain this too much. So Ra says, each portion of the body complex is in a state of growth at all times. Growth and movement. You see, cells divide, they die, but they grow new ones. DNA does the same thing. At a very core level, this is what's happening in our bodies. You see, that's the matrix of the body. If I can throw in the archetypical mind there, that's the matrix of the body, always changing, right? Always moving, and always in balance. So imagine that, we're always growing. Mentally, we're always adapting to the growth of reality, because your body is not just this physical, biological suit. It's everything. Everything that is around you. The air is your body. The space around you is your body. The floor is your body. The ceiling, if there is a ceiling, the sky, whatever. Everything is your body. As a state of acceptance and appreciation, love. Acceptance, love, appreciation, all the same thing. Now, the reversal of this, no desire for growth, is seen as disease and has the benign function. You see, we see it as some sort of issue. Well, it could be an alarm. It could be there is an uncontrolled growth. Well, we know this as infection in the sense of bacteria when we talk about a bacterial growth, or fungi. There's more of this growing, uncontrolled. Sounds familiar? Yes, cancer is the same thing, but it's an uncontrolled growth of cells. You're not supposed to grow that way, but you're doing it. So that is the cause of disease. It's a reversal of this desire to grow, and so things start happening in a way that its purpose is benign, like Ra says, to end the incarnation. This was the nature of disease, including that which we call venereal. So all types of disease that was present in the pre-veil condition had the purpose of ending the incarnation. Or at least that's what disease is. I have used my father's story several times, and I think it's because it's very useful for me to capture this meaning. Again, my father was not the most health oriented lifestyle person. No exercise. He worked a lot. His diet was just comprised of processed food, mostly, not mostly, but he would include a lot of processed food. And just in general, his lifestyle wasn't healthy. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he would drink alcohol. And he was fine. He was a healthy dude. Very healthy dude. Never got sick. And if he got sick, it was just for hours, literally hours. Like 4 p.m, he said, I think I'm getting sick. The next day, after he slept, woke up perfectly fine, going to work. Never missed work for being sick. And suddenly after my mother died, he died inside. He just decided that, he didn't consciously decide it, but he just felt like his life was no more. And suddenly he got sick and he died within less than a year. So yeah, it's a function of you and not wanting to live anymore. Disease will take over because you're in a constant state of growth. Something has to grow. And if it's not your desire to live, then there's going to be other organisms or your own body working to end your incarnation. That makes a lot of sense. And of course, prevail, I suppose this mechanism had to be in place for people to die somehow. All right, I think I'm going to cover 1 or 2 more questions depending on where we are. I think this is a long question. Let's see. Yeah, it's a long question, but we're going to have a very short answer by Ra, I think. Let's see. Question 6. Don says, I'll make the statement and you can correct me then. As I see the nature of the action of disease, specifically before the veil, it seems to me that the Logos had decided upon a program where an individual mind-body-spirit would continue to grow in mind, and the body would be the third density analog of this mind. And the growth would be continual unless there was a lack of growth or an inability for some reason for the mind to continue along the growth patterns. This is actually pretty good. He continues and says, if this growth decelerated or stopped, then what we call disease would then act in a way so as to eventually terminate this physical experience so that a new physical experience could be started to continue the growth process after a review of the entire process had taken place between incarnations. Would you clear up my thinking on that, please? But Ra simply says, your thinking is sufficiently clear on this subject, which I think it was, I don't know how Don used to do this, but this is brilliant, the way he described it. And I'm not going to reread it, but I would suggest that you do, because he is describing the process of how the mind is in continuous growth. The mind is always changing, and that's because the mind doesn't want to get stuck with one experience. Obviously, the mind is made to have experiences. That's the purpose of the mind. That's the vehicle of awareness, let's call it. That's the vehicle of awareness to move in experience, in the experiential continuum. You can even call it the reason why the spirit, or how spirit connects itself with the physical creation. You can describe it in many ways, but the point is that the mind is always in this process of movement, and when there is resistance to it, then we cause this sort of disease. Eventually, when awareness has seen enough through this body, then it decides to end the incarnation. This also accounts for the peaceful death of many mystics who simply know that their time is coming, because they just know it. They just feel that they have done enough and that they're happy with their lives. And you don't have to be a mystic to know this. You can just know it. You know when your life is ending. And I mean ending because of, that you don't want anything else from life. So that's what Don is describing here, and Ra says that is sufficiently clear. Let's see what we have. All right, I'll cover one more. Let's go to question 7. Here we go. Question 7, Don says, one thing I don't understand is why, if there was no veil, what the review of incarnation after the incarnation would help the process. Did he say that? Did I read that wrong? Let's read it again. One thing I don't understand is why, if there was no veil, that the review of incarnation after the incarnation would help the process, since it seems to me that the entity should already be aware of what was happening. Possibly this has to do with the nature of space-time and time-space. Could you clear that up, please? Ross says, it is true that the nature of time-space is such that a lifetime may be seen whole as a book or a record. The pages studied, rifled through, and reread. However, the value of review is that of the testing as opposed to the studying. At the testing, when the test is true, the distillations of all study are made clear. During the process of study, which you may call the incarnation, regardless of an entity's awareness of the process taking place, the material is diffuse, and over-attention is almost inevitably plays upon detail. They finish saying, the testing upon the cessation of the incarnative state is not that testing which involves the correct memorization of many details. This testing is rather the observing of self by self, often with aid, as we have said. In this observation, one sees the sum of all the detailed study, that being an attitude or a complex of attitudes which bias the consciousness of the mind, body, spirit. No longer complex, if you notice that. So, okay, we're talking about the process of review. This is the interim between incarnations. So that space between one life and the other, we have talked about this as healing, which wasn't needed back then, but review and reprogramming. So what was the purpose is what Don is saying. If they knew everything, why would they need that period? Now, Ra talks about this as a sort of test. They say that because we can see life as a book. If you have read or heard about near-death experiences, you have seen that they talk about this. I saw my life in a flash. It was like I could see everything that I have done in one single memory or movie. Sometimes they describe it. It was just all at once. So that's the nature of time-space. You can get glimpses of this in your own mind because your mind is the channel to time-space, or is time-space. It navigates in time-space. You can see, you can go back to the past, you can project the future, you can do all these things with your mind, right? That's what we're concerned with as humans. So, yes, your whole life can be seen at once, and so you can review the whole thing. Yep. But the value of review is that of the testing as opposed to the studying. That kind of makes sense because you want to test, you want to see, you want to grade yourself. It's not that you want to, it's that grading is natural. Also, let me go back to NDEs, near-death experiences, where people say that this is the value you see of people who have had these experiences. They say they did that. They tested themselves. You see, they go through the process of testing, and they say, you know, I feel like I should not have spent so much time overthinking things or being worried about life or working or doing too much of this, but rather spending more quality times, enjoying life more, and so on. So this is the type of impact that this experience has. You are able to see your life from a different point of view and more clear, right? So that's the testing. Ross says, at the testing, when the test is true, the distillations of all study are made clear. The study is the life study. Everything that happened in your life, that's the study. Why is it a study? Because you being awareness, you want to know what would happen if you are in a place like where you are right now. Okay? So you put yourself in that position, which is your life, and you study every single reaction. That's the process of study and learning, right? They're tied in together. So study and learning happening through the life. And that is, the testing is the distillation of all this study when it's made clear. Because during the process of study, which you call incarnation, so during your life, regardless of an entity's awareness of the process taking place, the material is diffused. It doesn't matter how much awareness you have of this process, the material is still diffuse for this experience. And over-attention is almost inevitably plays upon detail. You become narrow-focused. See, this is why we suggest that if you want to liberate your mind from this constriction, this stress, this worry, this fear, this anxiety, this depression, we go back to the simplicity of the floodlight. The floodlight that illuminates everything, has no preference for anything, and is able to see all in light of what it is. As opposed to the spotlight, which is a very concentrated beam of light, which shines specifically on small things, right? That is over-attention. That is the over-attention. It's the constriction of the floodlight into a spotlight, like a laser sometimes. But you see, the trade-off here is that you are ignoring the rest. There is no light. Everything else is in darkness. You can't see it. So that is what's called being in the present, becoming aware that you are aware, having no mind. This is what the whole premise of Zen is based on. Simply be here. All your presence, all your energy is right here, right now. When it's required by the mind to have a thought, you know how to use it and you go back. You're not constantly thinking and overthinking and see, overthinking, over-attention is almost inevitably plays upon detail. Think about it. I mean, realize it. Don't think about it. Realize that your mind is always there. It's always going, if I should have done, maybe I should do this. Next time I talk to her, I'm just not going to go because what does she think I'm going to say? This, and I can't believe, this person should have done, maybe I should have. It's always talking. It's always blah, blah, blah. And you're there. You're invested. You think you are that. You need to be prepared. It gives you this anxiety. You have to be prepared. No, you don't need to unless you want to. But do you want to? That's the question. Don't become victim of your own mind. Don't become a slave of your own mind. Let me put it that way. Okay, Ra says, the testing upon the cessation of the incarnative state is not that testing. The testing upon the cessation of the incarnative state is not that testing which involves the correct memorization of many details. Okay, so yes, when you die, the purpose is not to memorize all the details, right? Yes, the over-attention to details is not to memorize all those details. This testing is rather the observing of self by self, often with aid, as we have said. Yes, those are the guardians or angels or those positive thought patterns that are aiding you in this process. In this observation, one sees the sum of all the detailed study, that being an attitude or a complex of attitudes which bias the consciousness of the mind, body, spirit. So again, they emphasize that this is not about memorizing all the details to keep those in mind and somehow that's just going to help you in your process. No, it's just seeing how did you react to all those details that happened. The details are useless right now. What happened, like we say. Don't dwell in the past because that's non-existent. What's really important is how you feel about everything. You see, your current state of being. How is it? Are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you worried? Are you happy? Are you dependent? Are you attached? Are you detached? All of these things is how you feel right now. That's what matters. But if how you feel right now is dependent on the past or on the future, then you're not here. You're paying attention to details. All those details are unnecessary, completely unnecessary. So one goes into the present once again. And when you die, you simply see those biases that were developed towards specific things that seem to be very important. They're not. They're just there to make you, to see how you feel. And awareness just wants to feel at peace. See, that's its purpose. So, what else can I say here before we finish? Cessation of the incarnate state. I guess just say again that it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what has happened in your life. It's how you feel about it. Because you see, why am I saying this? Because this is what really matters after you die. See, on the cessation of this experience, as whatever body you have and whatever history you have, at the end of that, all that matters is how you feel about it. What were your biases? And remember, the purpose here is to love all things. So how can you do that? How can you love all things? Well, you have to find within yourself that which is already loving. It doesn't require any action. Because otherwise you're asking, how can my separate self become complete? And that can never happen. Separate, complete, can be together. So your separate part of the self needs to dissolve, so the self is always complete. It's only the illusion of separation that makes it incomplete. It makes it want to go seeking for its completeness. It will never happen, my friends. It's like trying to chase the edge of the universe. There is no edge. So you will never find it. You'll just keep finding more and more universe. And yes, that is all that matters. I can really say this with my heart. But all right. Conclusions. What was of interest here aside from this last piece? Yeah, I'll just mention something that came to mind before. Almost everybody says, yes, I know that I'm not this body, that when I die, right? When I die, something's going to die. Not me, because I will continue. I cannot die if I'm going to continue. So it sounds like an oxymoron there. But okay, we say when this body dies, I will continue. The question is, who is the I that is going to continue? Have you ever thought about that? You see, we tend to use this as a survival extension of the human body, saying, well, there's something else out there, and of course, whatever my mind is, that's what's going to continue, and I'll be responsible for that, and so on. It's an entry-level explanation for what happens, at least in my books, but it's not enough. I think we can explore it a little bit more. That is a little bit more deep, just a little bit more deeper than the idea of when I die, I either go to heaven or hell. But it requires a little bit more study, just like you would tell somebody who says that. Yeah, but what is hell and what is heaven? And I think the question lies in who is the self that is going to continue on. Like, how do you picture yourself dying? Not the body. We said the body is just a vessel, a meat suit. Okay, so what's going to continue? What part of my mind? Well, Ross says something interesting a long time ago already, given the years that have passed me covering this material. Probably a couple of years ago, I covered the part where they talked about death. Maybe not. Maybe it was a little bit more recent. I can't remember. But they talked about death, and they said they weren't talking about death. I think they were talking about what happens. It was death. What happens after we die, and what's maintained. And the answer that Ra gave was that just like the body is completely unnecessary for the mind to exist, much of what we think of ourselves is lost. Don was asking, what is lost in the process of death? And Ra said, much of what is lost is the unnecessary stuff that you have in your mind, thinking of yourself. So in essence, there is a physical illusion, which is the body. I am this body. And there is a mental illusion, which is the mind thinking I am this thing, and all my biases and all of this. All of that goes away. And at the center of it all is that love that you are. And how much of that love was able to be, forget about anything, absolutely anything that has to do with your mind and your body. Just pure love that you can have for everything at this moment. That's what remains, in my opinion, in my view. So, aren't we in the ways of love, learning the ways of love here? Of course we are. That's because we want that love for the creation to enhance, to increase. And I'm going to say this confidently, this love can only be seen and experienced from the inner self that you are, not from the outside. Okay, so this is the moment where I say, if you enjoy this series, please consider supporting me on Patreon, because that's the only platform I have right now for communicating with people like you who are interested in these topics, and I could definitely use your support there. Links in the description, as usual. I have nothing else to say, but we'll probably definitely finish this in 2 more parts. So part 2 is next. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you there.